Hello and welcome to the Schola Progenium. Today I've got a video where I'm discussing sort of 3 points that have come to light in the last week that I think are really important for us as Blood Angels and cast a lot of light on how we'll be able to play in preparation for 9th edition. So, we're all eager to get gaming, we're all eager to sort of get stuck into 9th edition, and depending on where you are in the world, you might still be under lockdown, you might be able to have games at the moment. But I don't know about you guys, but I've it's not that the shine's been taken off 8th, but now that I know that 9th is coming, now that I know so many rules are changing, there's almost, there's no point filming battle reports for you guys because they'll be out of date in a couple of weeks. So I'm just ready for 9th. And we're all thinking, how can we prepare, sort of wanting to write lists and that kind of thing. So I thought I'd throw together a few three key points for you. To sort of shine a light on what we should expect going into 9th edition as Blood Angels players. And, it's a great day because I'm sure, you've already come across the fact that Overwatch is now a stratagem. But the 3 points I'm going to go over, and then I'll break them down in more detail, is, first of all, I'm going to ask the question and break down, is 40k 9th edition actually the Assault edition? Everyone's been going crazy about tanks, but is it Assault edition? Have we got the wrong end of the stick? The second thing, and that sort of carries into that, is models that I have my eye on for 9th edition. So things that I think I want to add to my Blood Angels army, because I've completed phase 1 of the modernisation of my Blood Angels. Got my Intercessor battalion, my Primaris battalion in there, like core battalion. And now, I'm looking to expand that. And a lot of the original units that came out in 8th edition for Primaris were very shooting focused, and 8th and 7th and even 6th were all very shooting focused, and 5th was very mech focused. So what am I going to be sort of thinking could be good units to add coming into 9th edition? What am I going to have my eye on when the rules drop? What am I going to look at first? And then the final thing I'm going to discuss is obviously Overwatch is a stratagem now. It's crazy, amazing times. Absolutely praise the Emperor, praise Sanguinius. Overwatch, the days of everyone firing Overwatch, the days of spamming 5-up Overwatch are finally over. There's so much that plays into this, that there's sort of a subcategory, which is what does that mean for BA? What does all of this mean for Blood Angels? And I'll go into that, as a sort of conclusion after discussing the first 3 points. So without much further ado, let's get stuck in. So is 40k actually the Assault edition? Well, some of the first news that came out was the fact that tanks could shoot in combat. And everyone has been going crazy about this, and with the new reserve rules and all that kind of thing, and with especially the blast weapons rule that allows you to get a base number of shots to increase reliability for explosive type weapons or blast type weapons. Everyone's been thinking, vehicles and tanks are going to be the big boys in this edition, but have we got the wrong end of the stick here? Because it looks like now, with a variety of evidence, that actually it could be the case that tanks have received this buff because 40k is all about getting into assault, getting up close. You've got the smaller board size, loads of other things I'm going to discuss. And because of that, tanks needed that buff to stay viable in the game because they expect everyone to be in each other's faces all the time. So tanks need to be able to fight in close combat, and what's the best way to make them do that? Have them shoot in close combat. So was that just the way of keeping tanks viable, rounding them out and updating them to 9th edition? And we've just all gone crazy thinking, tanks up is going to be impossible, blah, 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 combat's going to be, various players are worrying about how this will affect our assault infantry, but perhaps this is actually to bring tanks up to date with our assault infantry. It's just maybe tanks will be charging, tanks that are geared up. They said in the Chaos Space Marine faction focus that one of the disadvantages historically of Chaos vehicles is that they can fight in close combat and shoot quite effectively, but it's one or the other historically in 8th edition. But in 9th edition, Chaos are going to have a really big boon because they'll be able to shoot, charge in, and carry on shooting for however long they're locked in combat. And if you keep pouring units in, they're not going to lose their effectiveness. They're just going to be able to keep spraying out and hacking stuff up. And for me, the imagery of that, especially in terms of a chaos perspective, is really, really cool. But yeah, all in all, could the Bile Predator be more than mediocre to crap? Could it actually be good? Could we be bringing these vehicles in as a support unit, sort of keep one in reserve and get it into close combat, or bring it in within 1 inch of an enemy? It doesn't matter how, they can't keep really, unless they block the entire table edge. You can get it in and just open up fire and clear something off your deployment zone with that Bile Predator as a sort of defensive unit in reserve, ready, so you can get the rest of your army forward, and then you've just got that ace up your sleeve. Now, to go into a bit more detail, sort of, I've said about how tanks are now sort of maybe just supposed to be in your face because of the way they see 9th edition is going. Well, there was some more clues to this, the fact that it might be the Assault Edition in the Chaos Space Marine faction focus, which might be an unusual place to find these clues, but the playtester for that said that it's going to be easier than ever to get into combat, and he mentioned things such as you can't block floors and terrain anymore. You'll be able to strike so people can't block you out of terrain, so you can't get your assault units into combat. So again, although we've seen that certain terrain that's hard cover, or what might have been better named dense cover or whatever, but that gave him +1 to your armor save in close combat, and that looks like something to be slightly worried about. But as the terrain rules have been more revealed, as we've had more Easter eggs dropped just here and there over the various discussions and over the various releases on Warhammer Community, and especially in this Chaos Space Marine faction focus, it specifically says that it is just going to be so easy to get stuff into combat. Everything's all about combat, and the sort of 2 units that they gave are sort of units to watch in 9th edition. One was Khorne Berserkers, because they're going to be great and find it very easy to get into combat very quickly. And the playtester gave this example. He's played the game, he's played that faction, and he is the Herald of Chaos, as is chosen by Games Workshop. So as far as I'm concerned, that is a real solid indicator that the debuffs to melee are to actually bring melee into a reasonable line, because it's going to be so powerful in 9th edition. It's going to be so easy to get into combat. And this is just really, really reinforced when you look at the box. If you bring up a picture of the box and you see what's in the box, basically all of there's only 2 units on the Space Marine side and 2 or 3 units on the Necron side, the Xenos side, that are actually shooting, and the rest is just all geared towards combat. You've got your combat captain, you've got your combat primaris lieutenant, you've got your blade guard veterans, you've got your judicar, you've got your primaris chaplain new sculpts, you've got your assault intercessor marines, and so all of that's shooting, and then all of that's combat. And then in terms of shooting, you've got the eradicators, which have melter rifles, long range melter. That's not rapid fire, that's not about spraying out Daka, that's about throwing out a few punchy, shooty hits, but it's not lots of shooting. And then the bikes, which look super maneuverable and super useful at picking up ITC style objectives, which we know is how we're going to score points in 9th edition. But if you look at that, and let's say you're a new player coming into 9th edition, you're going to buy that box and have a very close combat tailored starting army when you've just built that up. That's your sort of core force. You've got 4 characters all keyed into close combat. You've got a banner bearer, you've got these blade guard veterans with their storm shields and power swords who look tough as anything. The judicar with his amazing sword looks incredible. The captain's got some kind of relic storm shield that we don't know what it's going to do. Could be a 2-up invuln, could be a rerollable invuln, who knows what it could be. But you look at that box and you look at the Necron side, and you've got all these units. You've got a couple of units of warriors. You've got a tall thing, I can't remember what it's called, that looks shooty. And then essentially, apart from one of the characters is massive, wielding a huge blade. You've got your other big sort of destroyer-like creatures, but with huge blades, and they've all got big spiky claws and stuff. And clearly, this is tooled. This is a box set that is tooled up for melee combat, and the new players coming in to 40k are going to be expecting melee to be effective, and therefore, you know, the rules must support that. The game must just be tailored to that, and you know, I'm sure, you know, you're as excited as me at the prospect of this. It is if we are going into an edition where melee is the name of the game, then we are, you know, this edition is our 9th edition is our edition as Blood Angels. Really, really exciting. Now, this sort of point carries me on about, you know, looking at the box of what units am I looking at here? Well, in terms of the sort of what I would hope and pray for when the Blood Angels Codex comes out, if we sort of peer far into the future, and we look at a prospective Blood Angels 9th edition Codex, my dream, my ideal would be that these combat intercessors, these assault intercessors with their chainswords, become available to Blood Angels as a troop choice. Now, I'm not saying, you know, there's plenty of arguments and plenty of experience and gameplay would go into this by the time 9th edition would be released. Because I'm sure we'll all probably, or, you know, many of us will pick some up prior to that and use them in a fast attack slot. But, and, you know, maybe shoving these in a, I can't remember what it's called, all of a sudden my mind's gone blank, but the transport with the 2 storm bolters, and, you know, it can take the 4-up Invun Dome and that kind of thing, and it can take 6 intercessors in it, or 6 Primaris models in it. But that Primaris transport, 2 of those with 5 assault intercessors each, with an Invun save, so it's just really hard to crack it open before you, you know, get the guys out before you choose, and then putting them in really when you choose and at the perfect moment. You know, that's really good. That's kind of like 5th edition tactics again. That's like, you know, it's just going to be, you know, that is a unit to watch, and it would be so good to come full circle and get Assault Marines as troops, but just the modern Assault Marines. I would just hold my hands up and say, you know what, I'm happy to move on to Primaris now. You know, I'll use my Tiny Marines, you know, as and when it fits into a list when I need a few points here and there. But if we got Assault Intercessors, I would just be, you know, Games Workshop would have me hook, line and sinker. Whether it's, you know, better to have intercessors with bolter fire because we wouldn't be making use of the tactical doctrine if we didn't have them, or whether it's best to just have those Assault Marines, you know, who knows, we'll find that out with experience. But it would just be so cool, it would just be so badass to have a pure chain sword and a power weapon and thunderhammer wielding force that can just race across the battlefield and just tear the enemy apart. 100% melee close combat would just be a sight to behold. And because of that, obviously, the Blade Guard veterans, they look really interesting too. They've got this heavy bolt pistol, sidearm, they've got a storm shield, and they have a power sword. And that looks like a really nice combat. I'd love it if they don't really seem like they're in Gravis armor, if I'm honest with you, which is a shame, because it'd be really cool if they were toughness 5 and 3 wounds each. That would just be absolutely sick, a great replacement for Terminators. Now, I have Terminators, and I love Terminators, and I've found Terminators since the Blood of Baal Codex, especially tactical Terminators, to be really useful, and I know a lot of you out there have said the same. You know, dropping those tactical Terminators in, spraying off some fire, and then, you know, still having the power fists in close combat if you need them is really good. Well, these Blade Guard veterans look like they have the potential to sort of fill that role. Now, they probably can't deep strike, but who knows? Forgetting sort of side rule, sort of all the little extra rules they might get, just the fact that they've got that storm shield and that power sword makes them good in combat. It's not a thunderhammer, but with our +1 to wound, you know, it makes them really good in combat for us, even though they haven't got really any, you know, great strength. You know, but still, amazing AP and amazing, you know, with the Blood Angels, we'll still find it easy to wound. Now, they've got that Storm Shield, which is going to keep them alive, and that is like an Assault Terminator, but, you know, not quite as killy, because they haven't got Twin Lightning Claws and they haven't got the Thunderhammer. But in return, they're getting that heavy bolt pistol, which kind of puts them as a viable third unit. They don't need to replace your tactical Terminators. They don't need to replace your assault Terminators. They'll actually do the job of both. But you could, I'm really looking with great interest at these Blade Guard veterans and the Blade Guard banner bearer as well. Whatever he does, we don't know, but he looks cool and he's probably really broken. But I'm really looking at these guys as a viable option for me. because they'll plug a nice gap where they'll have the real assault element capability of my assault terminators, but they can still blap out that supporting fire and that extra DACA for thinning screens and picking off models that are in my way. With that little heavy bolt pistol burst. So, a couple of units of these or a big unit of these, we don't know the details of how we'll be able to take them in our armies, but they just look like a really cool option that will really slot in nicely, probably alongside another Terminator unit. So if you want a more assaulty element, you'd go with these Blade Guard veterans plus some Thunderhammer Terminators and really have a ton of models, loads of wounds, great saves, great invuns, and you'd just be an immovable combat force. Or if you wanted to be a more drop-in DACA support and roll up the field, hacking stuff and shooting, or as a more sort of ace up your sleeve, you might take some tactical Terminators and a unit of these guys, and they can then put out that extra DACA and really help your main assault units get in, and then still be able to do the job of assaulting and tearing units apart themselves. So Blade Guard veterans, really, really excited. Now the Judicar looks cool, and I've mentioned him. Looks really, really interesting. The fact that he can sort of do something time manipulation to guarantee that he kills opponents. Maybe that's a reroll. And who knows what that is, but he looks like an absolute don, and I know people, Blood Angels out there, will be converting this guy up to make him some kind of like dark angel of death. I have my eyes on him. I think he is going to be a badass. Shame he doesn't have a jump pack, but who knows what we'll get with 9th edition. Games Workshop have been very generous recently. They've given us priests with jump packs and all of that. So when we get the 9th edition Codex far in the future, maybe we'll get him with jump pack capability. For now, and maybe we'll get Assault Intercessors with jump pack capability. Who knows? But for now, he looks like a badass, and I've really got my eye on him. And then the third thing, which is another tactical choice, is actually the Fire Strike servo turret, which is the Tech Marine, or whatever it is, Primaris Tech Marine, with his eye plugged in to the mounted cannon, the fixed position cannon. And this thing not only looks so cool and so badass, but it actually also looks like just our cup of tea. Now, I mentioned in a previous video that a lot of our command points are probably, or we could end up spending quite a few command points on reserve units, and it'd be quite interesting to trap enemy units between a unit coming in from reserve and a unit charging up the field or deep striking in. Now, if you've got quite a few units off the board and you've got quite a few units moving up the field, but you've got a lot in reserve or ready to deep strike, your units that are on the board really need to be able to not only survive in the game but also put out that fire, and that's really all we need them for. We're not even, apart from really clearing screens and popping open transports so we can get to the juicy contents when our assault troops get into range, is sort of all we need out of that firepower. And actually, although this looks like the most unblood angel unit ever, it actually seems perfect for me, because think about it, they've said that they want real world tactics and all this kind of thing, and I've actually spewed a little bit of salt in previous videos about how I feel they're not going in that direction. But hold my hands up, I could well have been wrong, because I can really see myself having 3 or even 6 of these bad boys. They can't move, and they're not covered in guns like twin fancy assault autocannon or twin fancy last cannon. It's essentially what it is, and that's not that much DACA. But these things, it's got a Primaris guy in with a massive armor plate in front of it, and with the new terrain rules, I can just see myself sticking maybe 2 blocks of these, depending on how, if you can take them in squads of 3 or, positions of 3, or who knows. But, a big chunk of these buried in terrain, really hard to dig out, and able to just put down that fire to clear enemy screens and pop open transports. That's all we need. When our assault troops get in with our Thunderhammers and that kind of thing, we can pop tanks, we can do that job then. But if these guys are hard to kill and they take a while to get rid of, and they can just do those 2 simple shooting jobs, clear screens, pop transports, maybe shoot down flyers, we don't know how 9th will be, but if they can just get that effective fire down, whatever you need, and keep you in the game long enough that your reserves and deep strike units can come in and really start assaulting. What is cooler and what is more badass than charging in after a artillery barrage has softened up the enemy lines. It just seems so cool having this capacity for artillery fire. I've long been jealous of the big guns of the Guard, and that's one thing that draws me to the Guard, is sort of having an artillery regiment or something like that. But these things could really scratch that itch and fill a real sort of weak point in our force, which is actually being viable prior to the assault and being resilient with the units that are on the table, so we're not just killed off in two easy bite-sized chunks, initial units and then reserves as they come on get picked off. So really excited about that unit. 5-strike servo turret, can't wait, better look great in red. Now, so the final thing, and this is obviously the one that everyone's most excited about, is the fact that Overwatch is now a stratagem and it costs 1 CP. Now, that is such a significant change that I almost feel there must be a catch. Because otherwise, that just answers question 1 right there for you. Is 9th edition the Assault edition? Yes, is the answer. If most armies without fancy extra expensive stratagems having to spend a CP to get 1 burst of Overwatch off. Maybe that is the case. Maybe it really is that bad. Maybe Iron Hands with their 5-up Overwatch bullshit and Salamanders with their flamers and all this kind of thing. Well, I guess that's not... Well, yeah, I guess it is. But, and Mordians with their 5-up Overwatch, although not many people abuse that, but I have to face it, but it's not really a problem for other people. But, we all know that Overwatch is a problem, and we're as assault troops, and there's nothing worse than sending an elite unit in and the opponent getting lucky on Overwatch or having loads of Overwatch buffs and just wrecking your unit and tearing it apart, so it just doesn't even really do much in the first attack and doesn't even last to get a second turn, and you just lose the unit. But now it seems like that for the main part will be gone, but it's so powerful and so significant for melee armies and so distinctly terrible for horde armies that have a very low point and damage output per unit. So, maybe a unit of guardsmen, or even like 20 gene stealer neophytes, or a variety of just 10 cultists, or even like 10 intercessors. It's not that much if that's all the Overwatch you get for 1 turn. If there is no catch, glory, alleluia, praise the Emperor. It could not be better. Just try and get your head around it. This brings me on nicely to sort of the final section, my conclusion, which is, what does all this mean for Blood Angels? Well, Overwatch, not facing anywhere as near as much Overwatch, or, it having a real cost, whatever the case is, Overwatch taking a huge debuff, whatever the situation, whatever 9th looks like in the end, is just wow, isn't it? It's just absolutely incredible. And, when you combine this with the smaller board size, it makes sense, because a real problem that, I was worried about specifically in terms of Blood Angels tactics was dropping down along a smaller front where the enemy, because the board is smaller, have their units more concentrated and therefore can bring more firepower onto your assault units. Their defensive firepower is more concentrated. But with this debuff to Overwatch, that means that they'll have to pick and choose which unit do they want to stop from getting in, and it allows you to pick and choose as well. You can almost bully crap units. If you've got a big unit of Death Company, or even let's just say 9 Death Company, if you can hit 2 guard squads that are stood next to each other, is your opponent really going to spend 1 CP to fire one of those guard squads in Overwatch? You can still ram into both of them and just chainsaw 20 guardsmen to death easily with, just 9 Death Company, not a problem at all. And you're avoiding the blast rule there because you're staying under 10, so they're only going to get a minimum of 3, not a minimum of 6. They're not going to get the max hits. That just plays into our hands because we have really high damage output for model, which means we can play the game. As I've said, these blast weapons are coming in, but we can have high damage output without crossing that 10 model in a unit barrier. We can still do a lot. I only run 9 Sanguinary Guard as it is, so for me, that's perfect. Now, I'm willing to take 3, a flat 3. That seems fair, to be honest. Blast weapons did need a buff. So as far as I'm concerned, taking a minimum of 3, yeah, fair enough. If in return, only one thing's overwatching, it's just great. So, with the smaller board size, with the clues such as tanks being able to fight even though they're locked in combat, with the clues of, the Chaos Spaceman reveal saying it should be really easy to get into combat, it doesn't matter where they hide their units, if you can get within that engagement range, you can fight. With all of this stacking up, and sort of with the final, sort of the reveal that you can bring units in your deployment just straight into combat within 1 inch, that almost seems like, almost like a trap card or like an instant in Magic cards if you've like played a trap cards, a Yu-Gi-Oh thing. I don't play either of those games, but that kind of idea that you can be like, aha, it's an ace up your sleeve. I counter you with this, I counter you with this. You come into my lines, but then I deep strike this in, or I run this in off my rear board edge, and then charge it in straight away. All of these ideas shows that 40k is going to be concentrated and quick and snappy, punch and counter punch. And if that's the case, if 9th edition is fast, punchy, with hard hitting units coming in and dealing damage, everyone being able to get where they want on the board when they need to, it's just going to be a fast paced, excellent game. And all my worries about tactical and all my sort of concerns about tactical and strategic tactical maneuvering in the early parts of the game, that may be lost, but you've almost got this whole new element of like maneuvering of reserves and when to bring your reserves in, and everyone can sort of move around the board so you can reposition units in the game, and knowing that you'll be able to bring reserves in behind them or stuff like that. This as I said, if you move your army up the board but you've got a barrel in your pocket, you can just bring that in to hold your back lines. There's so many options here. It seems like it's just going to be a fast, punchy game. And that is the Blood Angels game. That is what we do. We have fast, punchy, maneuverable units that can hit hard, come in, do what they need to do, and then reposition and do what they need to do again. And that's how we play. That is our whole thing. So 9th edition really looks like it is supposed to be played, like it benefits that style of play. And that is a style of play we have been playing, for years. That's what we do. That's our whole thing. So, as you can tell, I'm really, really excited about this. It just is really, really adding up to being absolutely fantastic state of affairs for the Blood Angels. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses for the Blood Angels. There are a couple of caveats to this, but I personally feel they're very reasonable caveats and they affect melee armies as a whole. But one affects melee armies as a whole. One's kind of an interesting one, and it kind of affects us a bit more negatively, so I'm mentioning it in terms of some of our classic tactics. So in the Adeptus Sororitas, or the Sisters of Battle, or however you pronounce it, reveal, it stated 2 very interesting things. Now, the first was that multi-charges are a little more difficult, and essentially gone are the days where you can just say, I declare everything within blah 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 of my Smash Captain with Angel's Wings, and so nothing could overwatch, and then you could just pick the best target that you reached or whatever. But now, if you pick 2 targets, let's say one's 5 inches away and one's 10 inches away, and you only roll 7 inches, you won't make it to the 10-inch one, but you also won't make it to the 5-inch one because you failed your charge. So now, if you sort of, I guess it represents if your character hesitates and isn't sure who he's going to charge, that can cause him to stumble. I guess, for me, I just preferred it that you pick, you roll, and you can go as far as you roll. But they've decided to try and restrict it slightly. And I think, it's only fair. Clearly, with the board size and with everything that we've discussed up to this point, it's going to be really easy to get into combat. So they have to have some kind of way of stopping everyone just constantly declaring everything they can see and charging off onto something random, and then someone else doing the same. It just get a bit mental. So they're making you pick and think a little bit about your multi-charges, and I think that's reasonable. Not only do I think it's reasonable, but I think that we as Blood Angels can be rather unreasonable about this situation, because we can spend 2 command points to charge 3d6 inches, which means declaring those riskier or slightly further range multi-charges is, much more guaranteed for us. We also have our banner that allows us to re-roll charges within 3 inches of the banner. And for me, that makes this an auto-include at this point. And this ties in just really in a fascinating way, because we don't need to spend the CP on the Angel's Wing to avoid Overwatch with 1 unit and to give that individual unit reroll to charge, when we can instead take both banners, that banner, the one that gives reroll to charges within 3 inches, and the banner that gives you a 5-up feel no pain, and then we've got solid units that can move up the board if we're not spending loads of command points on deep striking in. We can use that banner that gives us our 5-up feel no pain. We can move up the board rapidly, so we're not burning loads of command points on CP and have just a few choice units in reserve. And that's our hammer, so that's our anvil that we're moving up the board with our fire support that we've mentioned and that kind of thing. And then, we've still got a few CP to spend on stratagems. We've not just burnt everything out, but I just, thought it was really interesting, because when the time comes, we can 3d6 into multi-charge units, which is a classic Blood Angels strategy. So although Blood Angels are, we love to multi-charge, and that is going to be slightly hard to do, we just need to be clever about it. We just need to play it right. And we've got that 3d6 charge for 2 CP in our back pocket when we really need it. So I think that's very interesting, and I think we come out on top of that change in terms of melee army. So, can't really argue if the addition is looking very melee focused and we've got certain advantages over the set restrictions that we've seen so far in melee. Now, the next thing is something interesting, again in the Sisters of Battle reveal, and this is a change to the Lookout Sir rule. So now, instead of being able to block off a character from being shot by any unit that's closer, so if you've got any friendly unit to a character stood even a millimeter closer, could be the opposite side of the board, but a millimeter closer from a target that wants to shoot, from a unit that wants to shoot, they can't shoot the character. This is something that everyone knows. But now it's basically exactly the same, but that character has to have a unit within 3 inches to be able to be targeted, and they have to have less than 9 wounds, I believe it is, or less than 8 wounds, or 8 wounds, or whatever the rule is currently. But essentially what that means is very interesting, because our smash captains can't sort of rely on a squad of scouts 10 inches away from them off to the right flank of the captain to protect them from units that would want to shoot the captain. We'll have to be much more clever with our character placement, and we can't just have our smash captains running around doing whatever they want. They will have to have units with them, and this is making me think that perhaps it's going to cost a lot of CP to have, say, 2 captains and a sanguinary guard off the field. So with reserve, if you're spending command points for every reserve unit. So for me, the way I see around this is something that I've done, is sort of a tactic that you may have seen on my battle reports. And if you look at any of my infantry army, pure infantry red tide battle reports, you'll be able to see this as an example. But essentially, you can have a sort of infantry wave initially that moves up the board, firing its bolters, almost striding across the battlefield, firing bolter from the hip, taking up important positions and scoring objectives as they go. And the characters are in amongst those guys. And then the characters burst forward and attack when is appropriate. And you'll have to do that. And I think now gone are the days of smash captains just zooming off on their own around the board, just wrecking stuff. They have to play with the rest of the team. And honestly, I think this is a fair change, because if you have there was just so many times where, the unit blocking the character from being shot is like 10 inches away from the character, but he still can't be shot just because of the angle. And that kind of thing. Excuse me. Whereas now, it should be just a case that it's hard to pick a captain out, or or something like that amongst. It's not hard to pick him out if he's stood on his own. If you see a captain screaming across the battlefield, sprinting, jetpack, jump pack, letting him, do little bursts of acceleration, swinging his hammer, coming straight at your lines, but there's a unit of scouts off to your right, you would just shoot the captain, you wouldn't shoot the scouts. So for me, I think that's totally fair, and it just makes us play more sensibly. And we are all guilty of throwing captains away when we get greedy with them, and when those captains could live a lot longer and get a lot more done for us throughout the course of the game. So really making our characters stick with their troops and oversee their troops and not just go hero hammering, that's fair, that's a reasonable adaptation for us to overcome. And I really don't think it'll be that difficult for us to overcome with the size of the board, with the amount of units we'll have in melee, and with the things popping off, all over the place, quick, punchy, sort of back and forth gaming. I really don't think that's going to be a threat, but it's something that, you need to be aware of. You can't just have your character murder bros, the Super Smash Bros, kind of without infantry support. The Super Smash Bros sadly are no more to a great degree, or they could operate behind your lines, but you need to have units within 3 inches of them, or they can be shot at, which is obviously not good. So gone are the days of easy character placement, let's put it that way, which is good. It's good to introduce these levels of tactics, these considerations, deciding who's going to target what on the charge, distribution of resources, resource management. All of these are good demands on the player by Games Workshop that require you to manage your resources, but they are easy to do and don't create a difficulty barrier for new players. It's easy to just remember to keep your character within 3 inches, or someone can of someone else, or someone can pick him off and shoot him. It's easy to remember that. So, and it stops good players just creating character combos and rushing forward and smashing, newer players. So reducing that difficulty curve by Games Workshop, isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as the tactical depth is there later on. It's easy to learn, hard to master, or easy to learn and a lifetime to master is what you want out of 40k. You want to always be discovering new things. When you get a new army, the joy is discovering all the different new tactics and combos that you can come up with, and discovering your own tactics and realizing that, what you can do with your favorite units. That is all a joy of 40k, and it really looks like 9th edition is going to give Blood Angels the opportunity to develop cool new tactics whilst holding on to the playstyle that we love and that we have all come to know. So just a few thoughts there. It's mainly all positives. The gameplay, for me, you've heard no salt this video, because previously I've been very excited for the Blood Angels aspect, but a bit concerned about the overall gameplay aspect. But now, my fears have been waylaid. I am really gunning for the gameplay aspect and the tactical depth of 40k 9th edition, and I am absolutely over the moon about the Blood Angels sort of perspectives. We are looking strong. So, I hope you found this video interesting. I hope you found it exciting, guys. As usual, thank you very much for your time. This has been the Schola Progenium. Goodbye.